Welcome to Lou Palumbo's Between the Lines. Problem solving for our future. Lou. Common sense, logic, and reasoning. Lou. The man that can't stand hate and animus. Lou. Stimulating the thought process of America. Lou. Where being right is not political, it's factual. Lou. Providing real solutions in real time. And now, here's your host, Lou Palumbo.
Here we are again. Gets more and more interesting every day. I had the good fortune to witness an exchange between Janet Psaki, the current White House press secretary, and the former, Donna Perino, on a Fox interview. So you're all aware, I watch all the networks, so I know what everyone's thinking, or I try to garner what everybody's thinking. And through the course of the interview, Jen Psaki admits that the borders are broken, which is a complete contradiction to what was said at the beginning of the administration when the borders were fine. Divine intervention set in, providence, and suddenly they realized the border's broken. But I wonder if they ever listen to what they're saying to you as they're saying it. So basically, we've had an epiphany, our borders are broken, and so I have a really basic, fundamental, simple question, being the simple kind of guy that I try to be, although I'm not always simple. You're in office 15 months. Tell me something you have done to address the broken border. Answer to the question, absolutely nothing. In fact, if you want to know what precipitated this, just to go back in history, I believe that the president, shortly after being sworn in, decided to state that he was going to give approximately 10 million illegal immigrants an 8-year path to citizenship in the United States, which is like telling everybody outside the country, make a run for it, which is pretty much what happened. Then we've had these immigration reform laws that are being held up, and something else that came out, which was really very interesting. It dealt with funding for COVID. Now, you gentlemen have heard me speak before, and ladies, I might note, and hopefully young people, children in particular, are listening to some of the common sense I'm trying to apply here. They talk about COVID funding, and interestingly enough, it's commingled in a bill with an immigration law. So you all recall I made a comment about the fact that the Build Back Better bill from Joe Biden, which is absolutely going nowhere, has commingled in it programs that benefit, among others, our children. Why aren't these bills related to COVID treatment, which is critical because people are dying, or our children, independently legislated? Somebody in Washington or on Mars or wherever, I'm not that choosy. You guys know I'm not that high maintenance, contrary to public opinion. Give me an answer to this, will you? Why are we commingling COVID relief, COVID treatment, COVID funding, COVID whatever, in with bills dealing with immigration? I understand what we're doing here. We're playing politics at the expense of the country. We're trying to leverage one party or use it as ammunition against the party so that we can, I guess, put a stain on them. All we're doing is hurting the public. Now, interestingly enough, part of the conversation that came up as well is the activity at the borders. And, of course, one of the things that was mentioned was drugs. We're getting fentanyl coming in epic proportion among with other controlled substances that are illegal. And then the sex trafficking came up, which is taking me right into Phantom Rescue. You would be kind enough to scroll, please. Phantom Rescue is an organization that is basically designed to go in and address this issue of sex trafficking. And obviously, based on Jen Psaki and her volunteering the fact that we have the problem at the border, it's happening all over the country. A gentleman by the name of Frank Smith, who happens to be an attorney, we won't hold it against you, Frank, and gentleman Tony Sparks kind of spearhead these efforts. These are things we're speaking about on a weekly basis that the public is not hearing enough about on a weekly basis. A task force needs to be assembled. We're having the problem, as I mentioned before, on the land of the indigenous people. We're having the problem literally in homes of children who are trafficking their own children, if I understand the conversation I had with Frank. And to our producers, in particular Lloyd, I'd like to get Frank and Tony Sparks on the phone with me to just see how this has progressed, if they've gotten any traction, and to further this conversation. So There's absolutely no shortage of crazy going on in this country today. This border issue is just hypercritical. We're also watching Russia up the ante in the Ukraine. They brought on this individual called the Butcher of Syria. And part of what the public has to understand is that Russia and Putin have applied a new logical thought process. If you're arming the populace of the Ukraine to fight us, if you're giving them AK-47s or American-made M4s or whatever weapon it might be, you are now fair game. And that's why you're seeing the losses the way you are. We gave him justification. Unfortunately, this is like you're in a no-win situation. You're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. But you're going to watch something, I think, that's going to be horrific in the next couple of weeks with this new player that's been introduced into this game. I think that the desperation that's going on with Putin is only going to heighten because he's not going to garner any traction. As I've said before, I say again, history is going to harshly judge the West. We are not giving them ample support to repel this aggressor, period. I don't want to tangentialize into gun control, but you might find it ironic that we're arming every person in the Ukraine who's a citizen with an assault rifle to fight against an invader and tyranny. Yet we're posing an argument here, and we're going to try to now convince the American public that you should not be armed appropriately. The frameworkers of the Constitution specifically address tyranny and foreign invaders. And to refresh everyone's mind, historically, after 1776, we had the War of 1812. Great Britain made a second run at us as a foreign invader. And they burnt our White House, by the way, which is why it's now painted white. Just a little history. But we got some interesting, conversations that are taking place. And, a producer pointed out quite astutely last week, I bounce all over the place here. I go off on tangents. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen? All these conversations intersect because they lend itself to the lack of competence some of our people are demonstrating. And where they most critically intersect is that every single one of these conversations, whether it's the border, gun control, the economy, gasoline, the Ukraine, all of them somehow are going to translate to our children. We're going to take a caller exactly at 12:20, but I want to mention something very quickly about the media. We need to start to consider oversight because of their lack of responsibility and veracity and information that they're providing you has to be addressed and put in check. There is no don't say gay bill, period, end of discussion. It's a bill that empowers parents to control information taught to their children. I just want to remind everybody of one very quick thing. When a child at 5, 6, 7, 8, all of which we were, right, is in school, we're banging it out with them trying to teach them the alphabet. Let me see. You now want to introduce something along the lines of sex, gender, choices. I mean, can you please let our children be children for a little while? Later in the learning process, they should have these health classes and then start to address these issues related to sexuality. Before Mike calls in, I do want to thank our sponsors, which is Buzzsprout and Instacart. Just very quickly, we use Buzzsprout. If you think you want to get up on here in a podcast, Buzzsprout is this incredibly easy, user-friendly mechanism. And Instacart, we use at my home. We actually use Instacart to, hold on, I've got somebody. We use them at home. I'll get right back to you guys. Hello?
Hello, this is Mike Mastriano. Is this Ryan?
No, it isn't Ryan. It's Lou. You want me to?
Lou.
You don't want to talk to Ryan. You want to talk to me, Mike.
That's true. That's very true. Very nice to talk to you, my friend.
You too, buddy. I hear you're Brooklyn born.
Yeah, I am. East New York, Brownsville area.
I was Bed-Stuy.
Get out of here.
No, Bed-Stuy, Franklin and DeKalb Avenue. Yeah, 304 Franklin Avenue.
Wow. Did you go to high school in Brooklyn?
No, I started grammar school in Brooklyn at Tivity Cathedral. I was born in Brooklyn Hospital. So let me cut to the chase. How old are you, Mike?
Oh boy, I hate to say it. I'm still 20 and I still want to jump the turnstile on the number 2 train on Pennsylvania Avenue. But I was born the year that Bobby Thompson knocked the Brooklyn Dodgers out of the playoffs. The shot heard around the world. So I was born in 51.
Yeah, so am I. I'm 51, November.
Yeah. There you go. a Mastriano and a Palumbo, 1951.
51. Now, interestingly enough, I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood. How was Brownsville those days?
East New York, Brownsville. I grew up in a housing project. And the reason I wanted to ask Ryan, obviously I knew just from listening to your very good show that you were a New Yorker. And I was curious to know where you grew up, because I grew up in a housing project in East New York, Brownsville, just off Pennsylvania and Flatlands Avenue near Starrett City.
Yeah, sure.
And, okay. And the reason I said that was because I listened to the Van Wee brothers down here in Jacksonville on 600 AM. You have the Van Wee brothers. You have the Martin Pilato, who has a very good finance show. And I was saying to myself, after listening to 3 shows, it's time to get out there and do something. And then you came on, and I said, nope, I'm going to be stuck for another hour. And the reason is because you're a New Yorker and you grew up like me, where we played with all different ethnic groups, all different colors, and that's how we were molded, that we never judged anybody by their skin color or their ethnic background. The only discrimination we had is if they couldn't hit or they couldn't run, they got picked last.
Yeah,
that's
the
only
true.
Discrimination.
So you know Johnny on the Pony.
Exactly.
You know Stickball.
You
know slingshots, and you know zip guns. Remember zip guns?
I do. That was more like the late 50s. You know, we saw the New Lutz Boys started to evolve from that. You know, the New Lutz Boys was the protective gang in my neighborhood, and we fought against the chaplains, the Roman lords from north of Linden Boulevard. Yeah. So,
how long did you stay in Brownsville?
I stayed there till around 1971. Then I moved to the East Village, which is interesting because growing up in a housing project in East New York, Brownsville, again, showed me that there's all kinds of people, and you don't judge them by race, or it's how they treat you and you treat them. And then when I moved to the East Village, I learned there's more diverse people. They could be transsexual or gay or whatever. And so I'll always say that the Lord gave me the 2 best experiences of neighborhoods to learn about people, and not to have the viewpoint that what's going on these days, which is atrocious with the leadership that we have, where everything comes down with these people to gender or race or racism, and it's done for a purpose. There's a purpose behind this.
I want to say something, Mike. You know, interestingly enough, I was the only white kid on the block, and I was the youngest of 4. And my brother Greg was 7 years older. We all had minority friends. That's really what it came down to.
There you go.
What precipitated us leaving Bed-Stuy, Franklin Avenue, was an incident that occurred directly across from where I was living, which was an apartment building, quote unquote. If I recall, it was only about 5 or 6 stories. My backyard was basically over a garage. And from that vantage point, I watched someone slit their wife basically from under their throat beyond their belly button because she had hokey poked with his friend. It was really interesting experience. You know, I don't know how much you fought. I fought quite a bit. By the time I was 12, I knew how to hold my hands up like a boxer because that was just part of your tool. You probably remember we didn't kick, scratch, bite, or pull hair. we boxed. I don't know where we got these codes from.
We boxed.
Yeah, it was funny, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But, you know, New York is New York, and, you know, I grew up pretty much in Manhattan. I lived 90% of my life in Manhattan. And as a result of the current atmosphere, I had to leave. I didn't have a choice. And,
if I can ask, where'd you live in Manhattan?
Well, I can tell you, I lived on 54th between Lex and Park. I owned a condo on 64th between 1st and 2nd. I owned a condo on 75th and 1st. I owned a condo in Trump's building on 70th in the river. But the place I liked the most was I lived on Sutton Place, on 54th Street between 1st and Sutton Place, which was my absolute favorite place. Not because it was pretentious, but it was quiet. We had a little park around there. And I also started having children very late, Frank. I was single till I was 54. So I had a rather unconventional life. Most guys were winding it down. I was just stepping on the gas. But I lived in Sutton Place. I also lived, by the way, up on Columbus Avenue and 95th Street. And, I was all over the city. Ironically, you mentioned something about ethnic diversity, religious diversity. There was a roller skating rink out on Metropolitan Avenue in Richmond Hill. Remember the elevated trains? You probably have recollection, right?
Sure.
Well,
Sure.
I was pretty mobile. And one of my first good buddies was a guy Ira Goldberg. Ira was Jewish, I was Catholic. I went to Catholic school, he went to Hebrew school, and we didn't know anything about this crap that our kids are being taught today. And I don't want to go off on a tangent about this Don't Say Gay bill, which is just a complete misrepresentation of the truth, which is why I get into this whole thing about oversight with the media. Everybody seems to have oversight in this country except the media. If you have a carry permit down here, there's oversight. Law enforcement. If you point that gun at someone, you brandish it, using the commission of crime, we have oversight. If you have a driver's license, you have oversight. The press are just running amok, intentionally disseminating information that is less than accurate. And more importantly, what it's doing is it's fueling this polarization in the country. We need to put the sword down. And you and I know this because we came from the streets and we understand what it's like to yield the sword every day just to get through the day. We're in interesting times, and my biggest concern is how this is going to impact our children. In your case, I suspect, Frank, being that we're the same age, your grandchildren, I have a whole different back end with my kids than you have, and I don't want to get into it because I get emotional. I don't have a whole lot of time. Mike, if you'll stay with me for 1 second, I'm going to come right back to you guys. We're going to take a quick break. Just bear with me 1 second. It's between the lines. Instacart, another interesting concept. You can go to your favorite grocery stores, sign on to their application without leaving your home, the comfort of your home. Just pick out the items you'd like. They'll assign a personal shopper for you and deliver them to the point that you would like them delivered to. Another great concept, very user-friendly, and I'll be honest, we use it also. It's very effective, and they're very, very good. They're very on point. We're back, ladies and gentlemen, but I do have on the air with me today, interesting gentleman, a peer. We came from the same neck of the woods, Mike from Brooklyn. We were literally almost like next door neighbor communities. Mike, you back with me?
I am.
Okay. So, we're watching the city in decline. When was the last time you lived in New York? Can I ask you, Mike?
I moved down to Jacksonville in 2007, the very beginning of 2007, and it was hard. I'm a New Yorker, tried and true. I did everything in New York. I'm a history buff. That was my secondary major in Brooklyn College. And I moved down here, and at first I regretted it, so I came up at least 3 or 4 times a year. My mom lived in Rockaway Beach. She was right off the beach there when that Sandy storm came.
Yeah, sure. And, I'm familiar.
Yeah.
I was there with CNN, believe it or not. I had the security. We worked from since 1996. I was down there, Mike, and I watched a piece of the boardwalk about 60 to 80 feet long, 2 blocks in. It was quite interesting. So I'm very familiar with the area. I want to ask you, Mike, do you have any questions, anything you wanted to ask me about today?
Well, my only question, not so much a question, but just a statement that you talk, the reason why your show is popular and will probably be more popular is you're very concise and logic about how you see things with the world situation and America and the New York situation. And I think we both know, not to plug anybody's book, but Mark Levin wrote a book called
he's excellent. This guy, Mark Levin's excellent.
Yes. And he's one of the few. There's another guy from the Bronx, Mike Savage. But Mark Levin wrote a book, American Marxism, and Glenn Beck wrote a book, The Great Reset. Those 2 books pretty much frame what's going on right now, and it's not good. So I appreciate you talking about all these things, and keep up the great work.
You know what it is, Mike? When you hear me speak, you have to know something about me. I have no political affiliation. I love my children, my wife more than anything, and I love the country. And I've had I've had good fortune. Just to tell you a little bit, Mike, about my background and my parents. My parents didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, literally. And I built a multi-million-dollar company. You know, we specialize in protecting high-level individuals. I ran the Academy Awards. I ran the Golden Globes for 14 years. I worked for the Sinatras. I ran American Film Institute Awards, Writers Guild, Directors Guild, the World Cup Games, the Republican National Convention, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, NASCAR, and I've had a lot of good fortune. The best part about it is how much I've traveled, and I'm an interesting traveler, unlike a lot of New Yorkers, unfortunately, because we get into that mode that we're used to having it a certain way when we're in New York, and when you deviate from it, it kind of, I guess, takes us out of our lane, and it makes us a little uncomfortable or uneasy. I have a lot of mileage on me, I'll be honest with you. You know, I told you, I'm born and raised in the city as you. I went to grammar school in the city, 16 years. Catholic grammar school, high school. I went to St. John's University. That's where I graduated from. And I spent a stint in law enforcement until I was hurt in the line of duty, and then I was pensioned out. And I've stayed in the community in different ways, and I owned a private security company for 42 years, and we've been very successful. But the best part about it is how much I learned, which is what people are listening to when I speak. I don't really care about anything other than the truth. And wherever the truth lies is where it lies. Sometimes it's favorable towards the conservative element. Sometimes it's towards the democratic or liberal element. The truth be told about the country today, and I said this yesterday because I have a radio show on Monday and Tuesday at 5 o'clock live on WBOB, it's 600 on your radio. I said yesterday for the first time, and I say this remorsefully, the Democratic Party is destroying this country.
Absolutely.
I'm starting to wonder if they're doing it intentionally. I'm starting to understand, which is really hard for me to wrap my arms around, how misguided people can be, that they don't think about what they say or what they do before they say it or do it and what it will translate to. We have never been this conflicted. And you and I, interestingly enough, come from the same side of the street. We were around for the Cuban Missile Crisis. We were around for the Bay of Pigs invasion. You know, I'm certain that you listened to it. I went to Catholic school with Irish Catholic nuns, and I'm half Irish, by the way. Don't let my name fool you. My mother's from Arkansas. She was Scotch, Irish, and Cherokee Indian. Another discussion for another day, Mike. Fireworks were amazing.
I hear you. If I could say very quickly, I know something about Catholic school because in my public school in East New York, on Wednesday at 1:30 in the afternoon, the Catholic kids were dismissed, a few of us, to go over to parochial school, to St. Gabriel's on Essex Street, to start studying for communion and confirmation. But I just want to say this. The reason I wanted definitely to talk to you is because you definitely see what drove you to get on the radio and talk about all
my
these
children.
things.
And all the young kids in this world that deserve something better. Mike, I'm honest about everything. I don't care enough to lie. I don't care if anybody likes me, they don't like me. I don't care. I'm in a complete disconnect because I've got battle fatigue. But I'm watching this shit show. You can edit me. And it's going to impact our children, plain and simple. They're not going to have the future you and I had. Just think about how carefree it was for you and I to navigate our city. Buses,
Amen.
Subways, you walked, you did whatever you want. You went out in the morning, you came home late. You're afraid to let your kids out on the street, and I don't care where that is in America. There's something wrong with this country. We don't have leadership. We lack a voice of reason and calm. We're so busy attaching to our politics and our agendas that we're destroying the future of our children. That's what's motivating me. Let me be clear about one thing. Things being as they are, if I could go and find a rock and hide under it and forget some of these rather disgusting and disappointing experiences and things I've witnessed, I would go. I have had enough of crazy. Now this is about trying to speak truthfully, issue after issue, and not just give a constructive criticism, but I can fix almost anything that's thrown in front of me because that's how I kind of was geared. You know, you do that in New York. You do a lot of your own problem solving because it's part of our survival mechanism. So that's what's driving this. I don't, anybody refers to me as a celebrity, I'm getting Will Smith to slap you. Okay, plain and simple. I'm not talent. I'm not a celebrity. I don't wear makeup, nor will I ever. No one's going to think I look like something I really don't. I'm not coloring my hair. We need to reinstill in the American public that you're okay the way you are. There's a gigantic discussion here about all the mistakes we've made, a lot of which are driven by money. But at the end of the day, if we don't change the trajectory of this country, my children, your grandchildren, even your children are probably still young. If you're 71, they could be 40, 50s. They still got 40 years here. I hate to say it, you and I probably won't be here in 40 years. But you probably have children that are going to have a lot more lifetime here. They're entitled to something better than this. You know, not for anything, Mike, you and I benefited from the loss and the hurt from World War II. The men and women that lived through that knew they had a different value system. We benefited from it in the 50s and 60s. We were a different country. We got into this education mode in the 60s, which is critically important. And then 1980 hit, and we lost focus. We got hooked on Wall Street. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, you know? Nobody could say it any better. And if I have 15 seconds, I would just say this. Because I'm a voracious reader and I watch documentaries and everything, I could tell you right now, Obama is the person behind the curtain pulling the strings. People like the mayor, de Blasio, and Biden, they're just figureheads. There's a new world order that they're trying to push. The richest people, George Soros is an evil person. He's funding money to people to do the things that the district attorneys are doing with the smash and grab. I was reading financial magazine Barron's. I read that constantly. The biggest article was on how corporations and stores are losing hundreds of thousands of dollars to the smash and grab, and you have these district attorneys in these cities that are allowing you to have a cap on how much you can steal. And it's all about a new world order that they're trying to get passed, and all this division we're having with gender issues or the wide open border, it's all a plan. They're probing us to see how far they can go.
All these issues intersect, but I want to say one thing to you, Mike, and I'm not saying this to you as a Republican or conservative. I am very conservative in certain elements, especially in elements related to your safety. I'm very open-minded in other areas. You know, you made a comment about, you know, the 50s and the 60s and transgender. You know, it's so interesting. I hung out in New York City. I survived going to Studio 54, among other places, which was a regular stop for me. We had everybody in this place, and nobody cared. I don't care today if you sit or you stand when you go to the potty. I am absolutely certain I had transgender people in the bathrooms with me. By the way, I really never checked anybody to see if they were sitting or standing. I don't understand where this all came from. But as far as your theory about this New World Order, I don't know if that's the exact term that applies, but there's something consistent with that term. We are experiencing a demographic inside the Democratic Party that has just been so remissful, whether it's the economy, the borders, education with our children, our major cities. You know, I hate to say this to people. If you're a Democrat, I feel bad for you. And I'm not trying to convince you to become a Republican. I'm trying to convince you to become an American and love your children more than you love your politics and your agenda. But the common denominator to every city where we have no boundaries, which is what you're talking about, Mike, and no consequences, is the Democratic Party. And they know that from within. They've got their own internal conflict. And they're all beating each other up now. And right now they're turning on Biden because they hear the drums beating. You know, Fox came out one time and said, let me be clear with you. I watch Fox. I watch Morning Joe, MSNBC. CNN has been my client since 96. Anderson Cooper, I've handled his security. I've been in Times Square with him almost every single year he's been there, with the exception of this past year because of politics. The long and the short of it is we need a course correction. The most dangerous element in this society today happens to be the media, and we need oversight. We need to harness what they're allowed to say. I know you're allowed to say whatever you want to say, but you can't yell fire in a movie theater. You should not be permitted to indiscriminately disseminate information that is just simply untruthful because you didn't expose it to a vetting process, Mike. This is what's wrong with the country. Part of it, symptomatic. Now, as far as Mr. Obama went, I'm going to make you chuckle. I voted for him. And if I told you why, privately, you'd understand. But the long and the short of it is, he did nothing for the minority community. And don't tell me Donald Trump polarized the country. Obama started that process. He stuck his nose into local affairs, making derogatory references towards law enforcement in Brooklyn for his professor friend. I got it. Then he stuck his nose into Ferguson and dispatched Eric Holder, predetermining the guilt of this police officer before we even started an investigation. And then I heard...
Lou,
yeah, go ahead, Mike.
The first tip-off was, and he said, here's a man running for office, and out of the clear blue, he goes, you have to be careful of those that cling to their guns and their Bible. And we didn't know what he exactly meant at the time. But I do know now, because here in Jacksonville, I know someone that's a Baptist. He adopted a kid. He hasn't harmed anybody. It's the nicest guy you wanted to meet. And because he went on the internet and talked about how Obama was talking about the church and he was talking about the Tea Party, somebody trolled the internet, and the next thing this person did, who never did anything to anybody, he had Homeland Security at his door. He told me the whole story, how Lois Lerner tried to get him. He sold videos through Amazon, and they tried to tell him he was selling counterfeit Chinese videos. They took his money. He's still recovering to this day. And the cancel culture, Obama, I feel, Lou, I can't help but say it, is probably not just the worst president, but an evil person.
He's dangerous. Hold that thought, Mike. Mike, I got to go to a break real quick. Hold that thought. We're going to come right back to you. So let me tell you a little bit about Buzzsprout. Very interesting concept. Basically, it allows you to set up your own podcast. One of the most advantageous things about using Buzzsprout is it's user-friendly. So I encourage you highly, if your inclination is to create your own podcast, please look into Buzzsprout. And by the way, we use it. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Interestingly enough, I have someone on the phone who's from my neck of the woods. He's from Brooklyn, New York, and we happen to be from the same demographic age-wise as well. Mike, I want to ask you a question. What prompted you to leave New York? I'm just curious.
Well, my girlfriend at the time, we both worked for the New York City Housing Authority. I was an electrician and then a supervisor, a member of Local 3 of the IBEW, and her daughter moved down to Fort Lauderdale. So I got a very good offer from my co-op on 11th Street and Avenue B, and Bloomberg was the mayor then. So I didn't leave for the reason that New Yorkers are leaving now. It was still, there was still order and order. Bloomberg had stop and frisk. And, but I am, like I earlier said, I used to come back all the time. Now my cousin in Staten Island is telling me, Mike, don't come back. The streets are unsafe and everything. I'm glad I made the move to Florida. I think Governor DeSantis is a very level-headed person.
Mike, let me say something to you, buddy. Interestingly enough, this is the place to be. And I can tell you how you know DeSantis is good, because every time you turn around, the media's chasing him. And what they're not understanding is they're putting him on the domestic map without spending a dime. He's a highly intelligent, well-educated, strongly backgrounded individual that keeps things very simple. He's a very clear-thinking guy. He's really, I have to say, an anomaly, because he's got chops, this guy, and he knows when he's right. And unfortunately, he's right most of the time. This whole issue, which we're talking about, this Don't Say Gay bill, which is just fabrication, he doesn't care. But let me say one other thing to you, Mike, that you're going to find interesting. We're watching the population in Florida grow to over 22 million now. I just read that yesterday.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
When you go on Atlantic Boulevard and Beach Boulevard, it's stop-and-go traffic, which I never saw before when I first came down here.
What they're doing here, Mike, that they're making a mistake, and I spoke to a young police officer from St. Johns County here, great young guy. I said they're building here like they're planning on an invasion, which they are, but they're not building the infrastructure. The roads, right, sewerage, plumbing for general purposes, power. They're going to do exactly what we do everywhere. They're going to make money building structures, and people are going to be miserable trying to drive around them. Mike, I got to let you go, buddy. I don't know why you should call in this afternoon, Mike, at 5 o'clock at BOB, and we can continue this conversation. I'd love to hear from you, and I'd like the local listeners to understand a little bit about your journey, my journey, where you are, and your perceptions. I make references to New York on the show only so we can remind the people here a couple of things. Don't take this for granted. and don't make the mistakes we made up there because the horse is out of the stall. Mike, I got to go. I appreciate you calling in.
Very good talking to you.
Likewise,
I
stay
hope
in
to
touch,
talk
buddy.
to you again. Will any of this down here in Jacksonville on WBOB? You come on Saturday around noon, if I recall. Will any of this conversation be played then?
Well, yes, absolutely. This podcast will be heard. I think it's 11, isn't it?
Is it 11?
It might be 11 or 12. Just check me on that one. And but it's
All right.
it's played every Saturday. And this podcast is aired nationwide. Spotify, and we have a lot of support mechanisms right now. You can find it a number of different places.
Thank you, buddy.
Stay in touch,
safe.
Mike.
Stay safe.
You too. Be well.
Bye-bye.
Okay, guys, we'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come to our second caller, Stephen from Colorado. We'll be right back. We're back, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to remind everyone, if you would like to participate and become part of this discussion and hopefully part of this solution, which is a very large part of why I'm engaging in this exercise, please contact us through betweenthelines.tv. You can email, and you can certainly arrange to call in if you have questions. I encourage you to become part of this conversation because, as you can tell from talking to me, I don't sound like everyone else, nor do I want to be like everyone else. By the way, I've never been like everyone else. That's worked to my advantage and to my disadvantage, I might note. But we need to change the way we're doing business. So I'm waiting for Steve right now. Gentleman's going to call me, I believe. Hello.
Hello.
Stephen?
Yes.
I've been waiting for your call, sir. I heard you were going to call in.
Well, thank you, Lou. Yeah.
Let me stop you. How's things in Colorado?
Well, Colorado today is a little bit overcast, but overall, I love being in Colorado. I've lived in Colorado since 1957, and I've seen a lot of changes in the state, especially, quote-unquote, politically in the last few years. A lot of shift from what I used to know as Colorado into what Colorado is becoming. It's hardly my desire, but it seems to be happening.
Where are you born, Stephen? May I ask you where you're born, buddy?
Where was I born?
Yeah.
I was born in Minden, Nebraska, but I moved to Boulder, Colorado in 1957.
Interesting. I've been in Nebraska, interestingly enough, Lincoln and Omaha. I liked them both, but I was also there in the 60s when that place was different. And, Mike,
Yes.
Stephen, your observation about, places changing is spot on, buddy. You're 100% correct. The political landscape is changing even in Colorado, that I've always perceived to be a somewhat conservative state. But I'm curious as to what your perception of Colorado is now.
Well, yeah, exactly what you said. There has been a big shift into liberalism and doing what's right for others and sacrificing what's right for you. That's the biggest shift that I've been observing. That it's less than okay for you to stand up for your own rights if it's perceivingly accepting someone else from their quote unquote rights, which is like an oxymoron statement.
Unfortunately, Stephen, we lack leadership and we lack a voice in the country that I would just say resolves some of these issues you're speaking to. For whatever reason, our media, which have decided to become extensions of our political parties, and many of our elected officials, not all of them, have taken on agendas that are dividing the country. That's really what we're experiencing. As far as the shift, Stephen, in Colorado to a more, I would say, liberal element, I hate to say it to you, but that's predicated on the people that are gravitating there. I mean, Colorado's a beautiful state. There's a lot to do there. But, it's up to the people to vote in the people that they believe are going to represent them. And maybe what you're leaning towards is that the demographic has changed in Colorado that is no longer, I would say, in alignment with your thinking. And I'm not suggesting you move. I'm just giving you some type of guidance as to what you're experiencing. And for whatever it's worth, you're not alone. I came out of New York. New York, for a very long time, went back and forth, Republican and Democrat, depending on the candidate and the politics and the agenda. New York is a completely Democratic-dominated city and state. I'm seeing the same changes there. You're not alone. By the way, Stephen, if you took a look at California, And up until the mid-'90s, where they started electing Democratic governors, the state was really very conservative. It was a pro-gun, heavily pro-gun state, you know. So your observations are spot on, but the question is that, you know, what do you need to do to resolve this for yourself? You know, you're going to relocate to Florida, which I'm telling you, this is the place to be. Where I live up here, the weather is phenomenal. They have, in my opinion, I don't think there's a better governor in the country than this young man DeSantis, who I hope has aspirations to be the president, because we need someone who has clarity in thinking, and he has that. He's not really politically attached by agenda. He just kind of tells it as it is, which is what we're lacking here. But, you know, I wish I could offer you a remedy. Come to Florida. Hang out.
Yeah, well, I understand what you're saying, but at some point, someone has to stand for what they want where they live, instead of just running to another place.
Yeah, Stephen, but you know what? In life, you learn you got to pick and choose your battles too, buddy. And there's another expression. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but you don't want to get into the habit of pissing into the wind, because you know what? If the climate there is shifted to where it's so liberal or democratic, you know, why are you going to spend any good days of your life seeking anything but peace and calm? Why would you want to be embattled in that? I understand what you're talking about. You're talking about principle. You're talking about staying there to push back on something that you know ideologically is not healthy for your state. I hear you. But I gather that if you move there in 57, you and I are in the same ballpark of age, and life's too short. It's too fleeting. It's just, I hate to say it to you, you got to go somewhere where your vote matters. You know, one of the problems that you're probably facing in Colorado that we face in New York, voting Republican, if you're a conservative, is a wasted vote. I suspect, is that what's going on in Colorado, Stephen?
Well, yeah, I mean, for instance, we have a gubernatorial election coming up here at the end of November, and I've been supporting a grassroots candidate named Danielle Neuschwanger. She lives in La Junta, Colorado, and she is the mother of 2 children and married to a rancher down there. And the divide that's happening in Colorado is between urban and agriculture. So most of the people who have gravitated here, as you've said, are in the urban, you know, the metropolitan area, and it's in great conflict with the majority of the rest of the Colorado landscape, which is really agricultural. And they the current governor keeps taking money and putting it into the urban agenda versus the agricultural agenda, which is a big mistake.
They're feeding what they're doing is they're feeding the voting base. But I want to say something else about agriculture and farming. It's just coming out the past week or so that China has purchased about $2 billion in farmlands in this country, which I'm really trying to wrap my arms around what we're thinking. But let me ask you, do you have a specific question you want to direct towards me?
Well, the main reason I was calling today is because of what is happening in California, and they have 10 new bills proposed there that are very, very restricting to freedom. In fact, it's mainly what I consider mandated imprisonment, where the number one that I oppose is a bill proposed to force the firefighters and the police department to do the will of the health department. So if the health department passes, quote unquote, I don't even like the word pass, but mandates or dictates some type of a safety feature for our safety, and the police or the fire department do not go along with it, they're going to take the money away from those departments and put them into the health department. And the health department is not even elected. I mean, they're appointed by, well, usually somebody associated with Big Pharma. And, you know, California is a test state for other states, and Colorado is right behind them. So what is going on in California is very important. I don't know if you're aware of a gentleman named Del Bigtree, but and the High Wire, they just held a 8-hour event outside the Capitol there in Grand Park in Los Angeles, where they had speakers of all different types. They had vaccine-injured people on stage telling their stories and just attempting to get the message out worldwide about the the mandates are still being a big agenda.
Yeah. Stephen, listen,
And-
I don't have a lot of time, but I want to just say one thing, too, that you're going to find interesting. Maybe what you're speaking to is why people are leaving California in record numbers and fleeing to states like Nevada, Texas, and Florida. And, at some point in time, you got to realize, when you are pissing into the wind, and sadly, in many dimensions, we may have lost California as we're losing New York. You got to change the political environment. Maybe we have to bottom out before that happens. But I hate to cut you, but I've got to rock and roll. I appreciate you calling in, Stephen, and I encourage you to call in again, buddy.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you
luck.
so much, buddy. Thank you, buddy. We're going to take a quick break,
Bye-bye.
guys. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've been listening to the show, and I encourage you to call in or to email us. You can contact us at betweenthelines.tv. I'm going to go to this email now from Kathy Ann from Jefferson City, Missouri. Happens to be the place my parents met and were married, Missouri. How can a Pakistani and Iranian pose as a Homeland Security and dupe Secret Service agents for 2 years? A postal worker ended up being the one who busted them. It seems like their motivation was possibly kidnap or to assassinate the First Lady. How do we prevent something like this from happening again? I had a feeling this was coming my way eventually, and I hope I have enough time to speak to this because this is distressing. 2 of the individuals that were involved in this were uniformed members of the Secret Service, and 2 were special agents, one of whom I know for sure was assigned to the First Lady, and if I understand correctly, augmented the President's detail. I highly suspect you are not far off the mark. My perception of this interaction was that they were staging either a terrorist incident or an assassination. I don't think it would have been a kidnapping because a kidnapping would have required a lot more mechanics and a lot more personnel per se. And these guys appeared to be operating independent of other support, so we know today. That might change. I did read something from somebody involved in the investigation. They said the more we look into this, the more disturbing it becomes. I am having a hard time reconciling that a law enforcement agent was receiving gifts, assault rifles, handguns, other little accoutrements, as well as a free apartment, and you couldn't quite reconcile that they might not be able to afford this. This had to be funded by somebody. I don't know who they're hiring in the Secret Service, but I want to be fair to the Secret Service. At one time, back in the 70s and the 80s, and I would say even the 90s, the Secret Service was the crown jewel of law enforcement. It just was. They had this incredible recruiting process in college. They had their autonomy, being under the Treasury Department, and they little by little whittled away at that agency. In 1984, on there or about, they took them out of the D.C. Metro pension plan and put them in a pension plan that is just simply horrifying. That's the only way I can say it. If you're interested and curious, look it up. The information's there. They further slapped them by taking them out of Treasury and putting them in Homeland Security. They also overburdened them. There's a cap or a ceiling on their overtime, so they can't make any more than a junior congressman. So they basically work for free every month. I don't know what kind of job this is. I'll be honest with you. I do understand where it was because I have a lot of friends that were supervisors in the Secret Service. I even have people I work for today in corporate America that are former special agents in charge. These guys are awesome. I mean, they're just great guys. The culture's changed along with the culture of America. Maybe the standards of hiring are changed. Maybe to fix this problem, what they need to do is that if you are on a presidential detail or the First Lady, for example, or the family, they need to polygraph you once every month. That's one thing I would tell you they would have to do. And that's in order to keep, quote unquote, your clearance. That's why they polygraphed them. But this is an unfortunate incident. It shook the core. This is worse than Cartagena. Look, Cartagena, they were guilty of being party boys, which is nothing new to anyone. This has been part of the culture. It's part of law enforcement's culture. Oh, that's right. Advertising people do it too. And so do accountants and lawyers. Everybody's out there having a whoop-de-doo time. The difference is they trust us with the safety of our heads of state at times, and also we have guns and other little accoutrements. But the solution is they're going to have to develop a mechanism such as a polygraph to identify if they are trustworthy still. So that's kind of a synopsis on that answer. And I tell you, this is very distressing, and I can't wait to hear what the end game on this investigation is, and I can't wait to see if they're even going to let you know, because I got a feeling this was way worse than we thought it was, guys. We're going to close now, guys. I thank everyone for calling in today, Michael and Stephen, and I thank you also, Kathy Ann, for this email. It was a very good question, and I was waiting for it to rear its head. Guys, this has been Between the Lines. My name is Lou, and I thank you for today.